Okay, hi guys, can you hear me? Yes? Perfect. Okay, I'm going to talk with you today with the title, Why We Need Free Cities If You Can Live Tax-Free Anywhere. Because there's a big antithesis of digital nomads who actually don't need free cities in my eyes, and those people who actually might need them much more. And I think many free cities are not covering that fact. This talk deals with certain different topics. I will first make a little introduction about myself and the core concepts we do with Staatenlos, the flag theory, the perpetual traveling, and I illustrate that with my own example, so you see how you can outsource your life into different areas of the world. Then I speak a bit about sovereignty, and especially passport sovereignty, how additional citizenship can help you to be more free. And then I come to the main argument with the tax residency. So why do we need a tax residency, or maybe not a tax residency, and how can free cities help with that? For example, Prospera recently announced a very nice thing on tax residency, but there's also a couple of other alternatives. I'll dive right in. I've just 25 minutes. I could speak for days. So slides are here. This is the, that's the next one. Perfect. So the borderless entrepreneur, that's me. I've been to every country in the world. I've been to every territory in the world. The map, you see, that's 1,300 territories. I'm not there yet. It's around 800 places I've been. I'll talk a bit more about that later. You see some other stuff. I'm also into seasteading. I have this nice boat with the taxation is theft sail. This is my new car. I'm going around with that through Europe at the moment, flying there to Spain, take it over on Sunday. But most people just reduce me on the traveling, on the Staatenlos thing. And I'm, for example, invested into 60 companies worldwide. I have a winery in Argentina. I have a walnut plantation in Georgia and many other projects, invested into Tipolis, into Prospera, many other things. Here you see my team. Most of them are here. We are here, a team of 4 employees of me. And approach any one of us if you have any questions later. And I'm just getting started with my talk. So the flag theory, what does the flag theory mean? Flag theory basically means go where you're treated best. So it's a kind of strategy you use to become more free and wealthy. It basically is taken from the investment world. You have to diversify yourself. So you internationalize your life into different areas. The world is a big place. In my count, there's 265 autonomous countries, autonomous territories. I've been to all of them. And you can use the advantages of all these territories in your own life if you're able to do the stuff. And that's really depending on the complexity. Some flags, like a citizenship, is quite hard to obtain. You can buy it, or you can live long enough in a country, or maybe you have luck because you marry the right person, etc. Some flags are rather easy. Down there you see some of the flags. Initially it was all about citizenship, citizenship of a free country where you don't are taxed on your on the basis that you're a citizen, for example, like in the US. The residency in an income tax-free country, the company in a corporate tax-free country, and the playground. That was basically the place where you spend your time, where you can fulfill your passions, your hobbies. Back then, like 50 years ago when it was invented, it was a VAT-free place, but that's quite hard to get nowadays. So the flag choice is interdependent and varies by preferences. That basically means if you're living in a high-tax country, then you have a lot of restrictions on where to put your company. Are you able to get like a foundation or trust to shield your assets? You are much more restricted than if you're living completely tax-free as a perpetual traveler. I'm coming to that. Or if you are living in the right place. Mikkel, for example, in the last talk covered countries like Paraguay or Panama, which are great residences as well if you don't want to travel full-time, but live in a place more permanently. Here you see all the flags. I don't have time to go into all of them, but that's basically all we cover. I always say our company is like a family office for everyone who cannot afford their own family office. So we basically do all of this in every country in the world which is attractive. Everywhere we have partners, lawyers, brokers, whatever, to help you implement the strategies. Here you see the map. I put it upside down. because it's just another approach to think about our world, and it shows all the territories existing. Perpetual traveling, that's what I'm mainly known for. That's actually me on the road with just carry on. Today I packed a suit. Normally I'm not with a suit, just running around with my hand luggage. So perpetual traveling, shortly abbreviation PT, also stands for permanent tourism and prior tax paying. That's why most people come to me. And it basically means you live outside the system by continuous traveling. I had the private passion to explore every country in the world in the last 11 years, but you don't need to do that. I always say it's fine if you live sometimes still 6 months in your home country and maybe 6 months on Mallorca or any other place you like. That can already give you the same advantages I faced in the last 10 years. It's not always that easy, but for many people it can work like that. Generally, as a perpetual traveler, you can also have a full-time residency in any country. For example, you decide, I want one place to live. If it's the right country, in my eyes, you can still be a perpetual traveler. If you live in Dubai, or in Paraguay, or in Thailand, basically in any country where you don't pay any taxes. Yeah? In order to make that happen, you have to avoid the center of vital interest. If you're a perpetual traveler, that generally means no permanent house in some countries. Take your wife, your kids with you. Don't stay longer than half a year. But every country is different. Every country has their own tax laws, so it's really different for which you decide. Of course, for this kind of lifestyle, you need location-independent income or assets. And that's an issue for a couple of people because they don't have that. But I would say, and I go later to that argument, that, for example, free private cities can attract those people because, tax havens can't. So PT, I explained the perpetual traveler part of it, also means permanent tourist and prior taxpayer. So the slides are a bit broken, I see. So permanent tourist stands also for geo-arbitrage. The idea is you are having your business, your employment in a high-tax country with relatively high pay, like Germany, Switzerland, Canada, Australia, and so on. But you live in especially at the beginning when you're just starting, in a country with high inflation, where your few euros you earn bring you much further. I had this revelation 15 years ago. It was my first South America trip as a backpacker in Bolivia. I was in a restaurant in Sucre, the de facto capital, and had a very nice dinner, 3 courses, bottle of wine. Just paid 6 euros. Back then, as broke student, I said, I will always be able to earn 6 euros to have this lifestyle. And back then I decided to become a perpetual traveler. I still studied, I'm coming to that as well. But then, I embarked onto this great travel of the world. It also stands for, what we have there, preferential treatment. If you are only a tourist, not a resident, in many cases you are treated much more lenient. For example, if you take drugs in Dubai or in any other country, as a resident, probably you face a very long prison time. As a tourist, maybe as well, but you're still treated much more lenient. And that's the case in many other countries as well. So in my eyes, it's much better to not become a resident, at least in the countries you want to live in, stay a tourist. A very nice argument is also the travel hacking. That means some people, like me, fly all the time, business class, and have the nice hotels very cheaply. Because all these loyalty programs of all those airlines and hotels and so on are basically written for the ordinary people who just stay in a place and make 6 weeks vacations a year. But if you travel all the time, you can completely hack those programs and have a lot of advantages. We have perpetual traveler, that also stands for minimalism. You have to give up some stuff, like traveling only with hand luggage. Of course, if you're a woman, that might be harder. I have the same problem. Morality, we're here at the Free Cities Conference, so if I say taxes is theft, probably most of you will argue about that, but sometimes I have to explain this topic a bit more. And of course, the flexibility. For example, when the pandemic broke out 5 years ago, I was in Yemen, in the civil war-torn Yemen, and I was evacuated with the last flight to Cairo. And then I had 10 hours before the Cairo airport was closing down, and I had to see where I'm going. And I had a big escape, Cairo, Dubai, Sao Paulo, Panama, Mexico. I spent a very nice month in Mexico. All this stuff there just started a month later. When Mexico started, I flew over to Sweden, had a great month in Sweden. Then it got a bit cold, I went to Croatia, bought my boat. So if you're very flexible, you can just run away from this international crisis taking up. Of course, per taxpayer, that's why most people come to me. You pay less taxes, in many cases no taxes. I never paid any direct tax in my life. I pay quite a lot VAT in the countries I visit, because my spending level is quite high. But I never paid income tax, I never paid corporate tax, because I just made my life like this. It's also about the bureaucracy. I actually never did any accounting. I have an accountant in my company because I have so many clients, but I'm not legally forced to do any accounting, and that makes life much easier. And you also have a lot of other advantages. And of course, hardly regulation, especially in the EU and the US, you have a lot of regulation with your company, but if you form in the right jurisdictions, not much regulation, there's more anyway as well. So my factory as an example, I'm not going deeper into that. I'm a German-born citizen, but that's not the only citizenship anymore. I got another passport. I bought last year the Vanuatu passport. That's a little country in the Pacific. It cost me around 4 Bitcoin back then, a little bit cheaper than now. And this passport gives me certain advantages. For example, this year I traveled to Russia. As a German, difficult, and at the moment maybe a problem that you held hostage for political reasons. As a Vanuatuan, I went in 90 days visa-free and had a nice time. I mainly bought this passport because I'm a bit fearful of Germany. What I'm doing is not what governments want, so they might maybe punish me by getting my passport, and then I cannot travel anymore. But this threat isn't that big anymore because of another passport. And at the moment, I'm also getting a better passport, trying to get one in Panama based on residency. I know Mikkel, last talk before the break, talked about a couple of options like Panama and Paraguay. I already got those residencies when it was still much easier. I have permanent residency in those countries since 8 years. Back then, it was basically start a company, a couple of $1,000s on a bank account, and you got permanent residency. Now it's much harder. So it's always worth it to do it as long as it's easy and not wait too long. Companies, for example, my main company is in the US. If you don't live in the US, if you're not a citizen, you can use it completely tax-free. My clients are mostly in Europe, so I have a Lithuanian bank account because it's easier to pay for them in the SEPA area than wiring the money to the US. etc, etc. So basically my life is in 20 different countries. This is a bit extreme. I think if you put your life into the 3, 4, 5 different countries, you can have a lot of adventures as well, of course. Here you see me at the South Pole. I haven't been to the North Pole yet, but the South Pole was a great journey. I really like to go to Antarctica. I've been there 8 times already. And I spend a lot of time in other nice countries like Argentina, Italy, Australia, New Zealand. That's my favorite countries around the world. So, levels of sovereignty. I remembered what I learned in political science. I was studying political science, actually government science, for 4 years before becoming a perpetual traveler. In the beginning of my career, I actually wanted to work for the European Union or for the United Nations. But in the first semester, luckily, I turned libertarian. I was very engaged in Germany and Switzerland in different organizations. I recently saw Daniel Model here. He had the Modelhof quite close to Constance, where I studied. And I spent every Friday there getting into this libertarian and anarcho-capitalist theory. And that really helped me developing my own way. So in political science, we learned in the beginning how a government is defined. And it's basically Professor Jelinek who said, a state is defined by state territory, state population, and state power. So generally, all normal states, like Argentina, have all 3. They have the territory, they have the population, they have the power. So how do the other things we speak about here fit into this definition? Well, a free city, in most cases, has the territory and the power, but it doesn't have the population, at least not in the beginning. Of course, over time, like Prospera, after a couple of years, it has its first inhabitants, now it has more inhabitants and it's growing. But generally, it only has the territory and the power to start with. We are speaking a lot about international communities here. Generally, they have the population, they have like a like-minded group of people forming the population, but they don't really yet have the territory, and they don't really yet have the state power to implement anything more than living peacefully together and working on the same goals. And then there's the territory, the so-called microstates like Liberland or Sealand. There's also talks here. Or terra nullius claims. Yeah, terra nullius is a territory which isn't claimed by any country. There's one very famous, Bir Tawil. Who of you have heard of Bir Tawil? Bir Tawil is between Egypt and Sudan. Many people claim a country there, but never been there. I've actually been there in 2019. You see my claim there. I put a Staatenlos t-shirt on the ground of the desert and claimed my own state. Well, it didn't work completely out, because on the way back we were taken hostage by a Bedouin tribe. We were discovering an illegal gold mine, so apparently people are living there. But I think my t-shirt still lies there. And back then I declared the free city of Bir Tawil. That was 4th November 2019, so almost 6 years ago. And very luckily, or very funnily, just before this talk, I bumped into someone who's been there this year. So that guy over there. So at least 2 people here in this room have been to Bir Tawil. And he's making an interesting project there as well. So anyway, I hop to the next slide, speaking about passport sovereignty. So in my eyes, more citizenships mean more freedom, not less freedom. Because you're much more flexible, and if one country turns totalitarian, you can just give up that passport, and you still have another one. But if you have only one passport, the government can basically do with you what they want. So what I recommend for most people who are able to, they have their home country passport, they still keep it as long as possible, as long as it's not turning to totalitarian. They have a small offshore country, like I chose Vanuatu, but there's many other countries like the Caribbean islands. Sao Tome has a good program nowadays. And I always recommend to also have a third passport from like a more powerful developing country, like the BRICS states, Latin America, and so on. So you can buy a passport, that's not a secret, and luckily there's more and more countries offering their sovereignty. So over a long time, in the last decade, there was around 20 countries, 15 countries selling their passports. Now it's almost 30, and it's growing. So you have a lot of options. Here I put some of the most popular options, like Turkey, just invest in real estate, get a Turkish passport. Sierra Leone, El Salvador, where you can buy a passport with 1 million in Bitcoin, etc. 2 new programs coming up probably next year, Botswana. Pretty cheap. Botswana is one of the most developed countries in Africa. However, they have a lot of issues due to the diamond, which can now be artificially created more or less. So that's why they need cash and try to sell their citizenships. And Argentina, we really hope for that. For me, it was always my favorite country. I really want to become Argentinian if it's possible. Unfortunately, it's not clear yet what it will be. Mikkel mentioned it as well. Maybe it will be 500, 750K, maybe $1 million investment. But let's see. That can be a very nice opportunity in future to become Argentinian under the Milei government. You can also do that same with residency. So there's a lot of residencies you can take. I won't go into detail with that. But for example, if you have a Vanuatu passport and decide to give up the home country citizenship in the EU, like I'm not German anymore, I'm only Vanuatuan, I cannot travel visa-free to Europe anymore. But for example, I can then invest into a golden visa in Latvia, just 50K business investment, and then I again have unrestricted, full-time freedom of movement to the European Union. So there's always ways to combine even worse passports with better opportunities. And an argument I want to make is free cities cannot really give sovereignty. They cannot give you a citizenship. So I think it's really important that the free private city movement gets this idea that they either work together with the host country or maybe even another country to facilitate citizenships for the residents. Because many people who go to these free cities do that because they feel politically persecuted, but they still keep their old passports. So I think there could be some nice negotiating power if free cities negotiate better terms for the residents with other countries. Just an idea of me. So the last argument I want to make is about international tax law. And that really contradicts lifestyle reality for a lot of nomads. The problem is the international tax law is outdated for decades. Yeah, there's a lot of rules coming up, and those rules are for big companies, but us as laptop entrepreneurs don't really need it. For example, now in many offshore jurisdictions and even in many EU jurisdictions, to have a company without living there, you need an office room, you need local employees, local management, other kind of economic substance, and that easily sets you back 15 to 30K, depending on the jurisdiction, sometimes even more. So basically, you can only form the company in your home country. But in order to have a tax residency, you have similar problems. Yeah, for tax residency in most countries of the world, either you have to stay half a year, or you have to pay some kind of minimum taxes, you have a local company, other jurisdictions, I come to that on the next slide. And that's a big issue for nomads who just want to live free, just want to travel around. It's not for them. So what can they do? The big issue is you need a permanent flat, and that also sets you back a lot, especially if you're starting. Basically, people just don't having much money, little income. They're really restricted from doing that, starting out, and of course, that makes them stay in their home countries and further tax cattle, as I used to say. Tax residency, of course, most of you are tax resident. You choose to stay in one country, but that's a big danger because, well, you have a full regulatory and tax commitment to that country, and that can easily go wrong when the country turns totalitarian, and unfortunately we have this development in most of the Western world, most of Western Europe, especially at the moment. So that's why I invite every one of you to think about the situation and maybe give up their tax residency. That doesn't mean that you cannot visit your home country anymore. You can still visit your parents, your friends, for up to half a year even, but maybe choose just another country to get out of the risk of being not only taxed, but worse. For example, a war against Russia or whatever, and you're drafted and sent as cannon fodder to the front. Well, tax residency, most cases is 183 days, but there's a couple of countries who have other solutions. The big thing is, most people think they need a tax residency, but they actually don't need one. So for example, my clients are mostly Germans, Austrians, Swiss. In order to leave their countries, they don't need a tax residency. They can legally leave their countries without proving whether they are resident anew. Some countries are different. If you're living in Spain, for example, a couple of other countries, you need a tax residency to get out initially, but only for 1 year. And then you don't need it anymore as well. So it really depends where you're currently staying and what your citizenship is. And many people also confuse the terms, like a tax residence is not a tax number. You can have a tax number in many countries. I have a tax number, I think, in 5 countries, but that doesn't make me taxable there. But I can still provide these tax numbers to a bank account, to other financial platforms to verify myself. Same about the residency permit. If you get a permanent residency permit in Panama, in Paraguay, in Dubai, like a golden visa etc., again, that's not the tax residency. It's just the permission to stay for unlimited time in this country, but only if you actually do that. If you go over 3 months or 6 months, you are actually a tax resident. And as well, this is not a tax declaration. You can be tax resident. That doesn't mean you have to pay taxes. There's a lot of tax-free countries. There's still over 50 countries in the world where you can, structured well, live completely tax-free. So here I've put a couple of options. A very nice option just recently passed, but I was told I'm allowed to tell that, is Prospera. Prospera introduced very recently the option of tax residency with just 7 days of stay, a local company residency, and $5,000 in minimum tax. So it's a rather good option on worldwide scale. Just go to Prospera, there's great things going on there. Stay there for a bit, pay this minimum tax, and then you get a tax certificate, which is recognized, because in the end, Prospera is Honduras. Yeah? So this is a good option. At the moment, we mostly do Paraguay. It's also possible without a stay, but you need to travel there now and then, and you have to do monthly tax declarations. Other countries, for example, it's not comprehensive. We have Antigua, it's already 20,000 minimum tax and the local flat. Cyprus, very popular in Europe, where you have to stay 60 days, but start a local company and pay into the social security system to sponsor the Cypriots. And Monaco, for example, where 90 days is fine, but in order to live in Monaco, you have to put a lot of money on the bank account and have a very expensive permanent flat in order to keep living there. So I want to make the argument now, free cities, are they really required for digital nomads? Or should they maybe overthink their marketing approach? Because I'm a digital nomad, I don't need to move to Prospera. I can live free in any country of the world because I know how to do it. And many of our clients know how to do it as well. So digital nomad freedom requires digital work and sufficient assets. How can physical workers do that? I mean, still digital nomads are maybe 1%, probably less of the world population. Most people are actually living and working in their daily life in physical jobs. And you can do physical work, even tax-free. We have a lot of clients from from many different physical industries. But that's really depending on where they live. So in some countries, up to 6 months, you can do local work and not pay taxes, but often you have restricted tax liabilities, you have withholding taxes on that kind of work. So it's not really attractive. And tax havens are not attractive either, because in tax havens, it's generally only for digital work. So many tax havens are great if you have foreign income, but if you have local income, for example in Panama, you're still taxed up to 40%. So many jurisdictions are just good for digital work. And I think free cities can really offer much more freedom to physical business and workers because they don't have this choice. There's very few countries around the world where you can have a physical business on the ground or physical, okay, time is up. You see, fair, it's only one more slide. Free cities can give them fair, low taxes and easy bureaucracy, less logic or self-chosen regulation, clear liabilities with, for example, insurance arbitration solutions, and easy participation models in the companies, for example. So in my eyes, that also makes the free cities more attractive for digital nomads. Because at the moment, when I can live tax-free in basically every country in the world, I don't need to move to a free city. But once there's a certain infrastructure, of course, that gets better. So my argument in the end is digital nomads can live tax-free everywhere. Physical workers cannot. Basically, the rest I already explained. Just an idea for the free city movement to think about. And I here made the Burj Khalifa as an example, Dubai. Dubai is kind of the exception at the moment. It is a country with no income taxes where people can work physically and still don't pay income taxes. But Dubai has a lot of other problems. At the moment, there's a worrying tendency of bureaucratization. There's so many laws coming up every new month. So in my eyes, Dubai is already lost. Once you have introduced the tax office and many other offices, it will just increase, and you will never get rid of it again. And that's also why we need free cities offering these opportunities. So that was it. I still have 2 other talks at this nice conference. There's a panel tomorrow with Mikkel, how to thrive as a borderless entrepreneur. On Sunday, there's Ask Me Anything on all these questions. So just be there, ask me anything, and approach us, me and my employees, Caroline, Irina, Katarina, and Chris anytime. We're happy to answer your questions.